Like I had mentioned, the soundscape is a combination of four major factors: the dialogue, the general ambient sound effects, incidental sounds, Foley, music, and something very unique to us, Indian films, is song. So I'll start with the dialogue. There are a few questions on dialogue. What is sync sound recording and what is ADR? Sync sound recording is basically also known as production sound. It is the sound that is being captured while the shooting is on. If there are 2 or 3 or 4 characters, then these characters are going to be talking amongst themselves. So when the dialogue, when the characters are speaking to each other, they are communicating information. We as an audience, when we are watching, hearing a group discussion, then we are listening to this character, then we are listening to the other character, then we are listening to the third character. So this is how, when the shoot is on, then what happens is, like, these individual characters are speaking in individual microphones that we have wired them with. We put these lapel microphones so that you don't see those microphones. And the sounds of those individual characters are recorded separately on a multi-track digital recorder. This is a professional recorder which is used on location. And it's a high-end professional recorder, so you have a very good quality recording on that. Now, apart from these lapel microphones, you also have a boom microphone. We call it a boom microphone, like a shotgun microphone. And we are using this shotgun microphone to also capture the room tone or the incidental sound around that area. Suppose these two characters are sitting in a park and they're talking, or they're sitting inside a room and they're talking. So there are some inherent sounds of that environment which are also being captured by the boom microphone. And to some extent, it is also being picked up by the individual lapel microphones of these characters. So what happens is, when these tracks are recorded, they are laid out by the editor on when he's doing the editing. Then there are all these dedicated tracks for dedicated characters, because that will give me the freedom of individually processing the tracks. Like, if I want to increase the high frequency of a particular character, or if I want to cut the low frequency of another character, or if I want to boost the mid frequency of a third character, then I can individually do these on their respective tracks. So this is a flexibility that I have. And also, at times, what happens is, when you're in a location where it is very noisy, then obviously the sound that we are using on location cannot possibly be used. There are various reasons for this. I mean, it could be a beautiful location, but then there's a huge factory nearby which is creating a massive industrial sound. Now, in a perfectly romantic scene, you don't want that sort of a sound coming in. So what we have to do is, we have to dub that particular dialogue, because there is a disturbance. Now, this disturbance could be due to an external noise. It could be a technical problem. It could be a glitch where there's a contact issue or a contact problem which is given some kind of a disturbance. So there are these kind of unwanted sounds which have probably bled into the main character sound. So we have to replace this dialogue. How do we replace this dialogue? We have to dub this dialogue. This process is called dubbing, or ADR, automated dialogue replacement. So what happens is, the character will have to repeat the dialogue later on when we are doing the dubbing. When the editing is done and we are watching the visuals, then we are using the main sounds of what we had recorded. But there are certain dialogues which we cannot use. So we have redubbed them. So, but we have to make sure that the way the dialogue has been delivered on location, the character or the actor should be able to exactly try and replicate that same kind of an emotion. So that will bring in a certain level of consistency. It will not sound like it is a dubbed dialogue. So the dubbing has to be integrated with the rest of the track. Now what happens is, when you're dubbing the track, we are not getting the location, the sounds on the location that like I was telling you, whether we are in a park or whether we are in a room, there are also other sounds bleeding in. So when we are dubbing this particular character in a quiet studio, then suddenly we are having a very clean sound of this character. And then we realize that we need to, like in the sync sound, like the other sounds were being captured along with the dialogue, we have to artificially generate that particular sound. So what we do on location is we record a room tone or we record an environmental sound, which is peculiar to that particular location. Like suppose it's a seaside that I've been recording in, and there have been sounds of the sea that are coming into the dialogue track. Now in a dub or in a railway station, for example, if I'm dubbing and there's a lot of crowd and chaos in a railway station, so when I'm dubbing that particular character, then all these sounds, either of the sea or of the railway station, they are missing in the dub track because I'm dubbing it in a very quiet studio or a quiet environment. So I have to, while the shooting was on, what I had done was I had recorded the, before the shoot took place, I went around recording the sounds of that particular environment, the sound of the seas or the sound of the railway stations. So when the dubbing is done, I have to add these particular sounds behind the dubbed sound to bring in a certain consistency so that you don't find a jump between the production sound and the ADR or the dubbed sound. How well you do it will depends technically on your expertise, your experience, is how well you can integrate the whole thing. So this actually 75% of this problem will be solved if you're if the character or the actor can repeat the same kind of the same way he has spoken the dialogues. Like suppose he says, "Hey, how are you?" He cannot in the dubbing come and say, "Hey, how are you?" He'll have to repeat the same thing like he had done on location. "Hey, how are you?" So he'll have to dub it like that. So I get the same pitch, I get the same tonality. And then it will be easier for me to match the dialogues which are recorded on location and which are recorded in the dubbing studio. In this context, I would also want you to understand there is something called acoustics. Acoustics is basically the sound, the quality of the sound of your immediate environment. Now, if you walk into an empty room, it'll sound a different way. Most of you would have entered into a new flat or a new house, and you could find your voice reflecting off the walls and creating a certain reverberation. So it sounds different. But the moment you start putting furniture in it, like you put your bed and you put your sofa, so all these reflected sounds get absorbed. That makes your voice a little less reflective in that particular surface. So every room has a particular tone of its own. If you're walking into a church, then what happens is your voice will reflect. Or if you're walking into a huge auditorium or a large hall, your voice will reflect much more. There will be a larger reverb. So what happens is when you're dubbing, because it is this particular reverb or this particular room tone, room reverb is being captured by your original microphone. Now, when you're dubbing in a quiet, dead studio, you have to artificially generate this particular reverb. For that, you have to know or understand what is reverb time. Like what is the time? Like if you're walking into a church and you're speaking, you'll probably have a 5-second decay time. Now you have to artificially know when you're in your processing that, okay, this is a particular reverb, the kind of reverb that you're listening to, and the reverb time that you're going to set. So you have to understand this process. So if you know how to use these plugins, then it will be easier for you to simulate that particular effect, that original effect that you intended to do. So basically, if I'm speaking in a dead room, I can artificially enhance a particular reverb and make it sound like it is in a church, that he's talking in a church or in a large auditorium. So you have to know how to match, apart from the level and the pitch of the actor, you have to understand that this is how we match the ADR along with the sync sound. After the shooting process is done, the film goes into what we call editing. Now, when the editing is done, all the NG shots, or the shots that are not good or that were not right, there were some faults in that, the acting was not right, or the situation was not right. So all these things are removed on the editing table, and the shots that that the director prefers most is added, retained by the editor, and sometimes various angles, the way they cut the shots to enhance a particular drama which you bring through your editing of the film is done. Now, after the editing is done, it is sent to us. Now, when it is sent to us, then we sit and start working on the dialogue track. Now, a lot of people have asked me, what is dialogue editing? Dialogue editing is basically selecting the okay takes of the dialogues and cleaning those particular dialogues and processing those particular dialogues. Sometimes, if in the first take the visual was good, but the dialogue in the second take was better, and if I choose to keep the dialogue of the second take, I'll have to make sure that I match the second take wala dialogue to the first take visual. Now, there could be a slight difference in length, or it could be a slight difference in tonality, or some minor things like that, which I can do on my workstation. I can either time stretch it a little to synchronize the dialogues, or I can shift the dialogues a few frames and match it with the visuals. We call it lip syncing. So this process is done. Then so this is continuously done. And if there are ADR sounds like the dub sounds which are also coming in, then we are integrating these dub sounds with the location sound or the production sound. And we are trying to bring in a consistency. And like I told you, then we add little reverb. Suppose the person is standing in a staircase, there's a particular way it sounds. Suppose he's speaking in a bathroom or he's singing in a bathroom. The bathroom has a certain kind of a reverb which most of you have felt. A lot of you would be doing a lot of bathroom singing. So why do we like to do that? Because the bathroom surface is tiled and is very reflective, and it adds a certain reverb to our voice. And it makes us all believe that we are fantastic singers. So what happens is we try and add those kind of reverbs in the dialogues, and we bring in a certain kind of a consistency. We also, I do in that particular process is, maybe some dialogues are a little soft or some dialogues are a little loud. I bring a certain consistency in terms of levels also. Like the next shot, the dialogue needs to be a little louder, or it also depends on the magnification. Like suppose it's a close-up shot of the actor. Then what happens is, if I come close, then this is the way I'm going to talk. Then you will hear that my volume has gone up. And if I go back a little, my volume has reduced. So these are artificially also done and in the mixing process. But what I like to do is, before I get into the mixing process, I like to work on these particular elements. And one of the questions was in Three Idiots, when Raju was in hospital, how did I process the voice? It was not Raju's voice that was processed. It was his perception of Amir's voice or Maddie's voice. So it seemed like he was like Rancho's voice was like, garbled and stuff like that. Now, the director Raju Hirani, what he had done was he time stretched it on his machine, which I kind of finalized on my machine, because the processing on audio workstation is far superior to a video processing. But he gave the idea that, this is what I would like. And I would have done it anyways. I would have slowed down the dialogue. And in my subconscious, in my, semi-conscious kind of a state, when somebody is talking to you, and if I'm just coming out of an anesthesia or if I'm coming out of a surgical procedure, things tend to, whether it's your visual, whether it's your sound, it's not very clear. It seems a little distorted. Your perception is a little distorted. So we were trying to simulate that by extending the dialogue and dropping the pitch of the dialogue and making the dialogue appear a little slow. So this way what happens is it gives the audience a feeling that, okay, this is what, because he's been injured in the head and because he's coming out of his anesthesia, that this is how he's probably perceiving it. So that is how we created that particular effect.